Hi, good morning, good afternoon, good day, wherever you are in the world. Welcome to an introduction to the platform engineering class, particularly a section known as the broad overview of the Big Bang software factory. As you go through this course, you're going to be asking yourself questions like, why are we learning Docker? Why are we learning Kubernetes? Where does Flux play into this? What is the overall intention around learning all of these different components? How do they all fit together? The intention here is just to give a short exposition as to possibly answering that question. Now, in the normal magical world of application hosting, code goes in somewhere, usually to some kind of pipeline. Could be a build pipeline, a CI/CD pipeline, whatever we're calling our pipeline, but some kind of mechanized automated process. Sometimes it's manual, but hopefully it's automated. Code goes in, something happens, and a customer-facing application comes out. And to most people, whether you're on the software end or the operations end or somewhere in between, it seems like this is a little bit of magic when you're looking from the outside into this space. All of a sudden, someone commits some code, it goes into a repo, magic happens, maybe an app is built, maybe that app is containerized, and the next thing you know, it's out in production and it's scalable, monitored, supported, all this other stuff on top of all this infrastructure. That's a general way that people think about the way this happens. Is it's just kind of this transformation that occurs. Well, this particular course is meant to cover a very opinionated way of approaching this. It's not just a mystery. We want to take sections of this, not the entire thing, because that's not the responsibility of all different roles, although all people should be interested in the whole process, hopefully, whether you're a developer, operations, or somewhere in between. But in broad terms, what we're really talking about is something that is overwhelming like this. Where, for example, we've got a Git repo on the upper left-hand side with this purple little code box. And that code box somehow shifts down and goes into this CI/CD pipeline. And it gets, maybe it's a feature branch that gets merged into a main branch, and then that gets built. And let's say it's a Java app and it gets built and we're going to build some kind of artifact file, right? Like a war, for example, or a jar or an ear. We don't really do that anymore. Probably a jar file. And so what will happen is that will get built, and then at that point in time, we have an app that we could actually deploy. But what if it needs to be containerized because we're doing containerization? We're not, running serverless or running an OS level application hosting. Well, then there might be different versions of flavors or other tools that come in. What about security scanning? What about all of these other pieces that could be part of our software factory? And as you can see down in green below, and you can see in red below, you can see in the blue, and you'll see that those are mainly concerns about where does this image go? Who's going to actually watch the repo and trigger this CI/CD process? Where does this CI/CD process live? What happens here? And then after all that's done and we have everything containerized, where does the container image live? Who hosts that? How does it get scanned? And when the user uses the app, how do they log in? If you look, with the exception of the yellow boxes on the left-hand side, you'll see that there's a GitOps agent that watches the Git repo. There's an image repository that's actually different in that green box than the one that's in the upper right-hand side where it's a hardened image repository. And then we have a library artifact repo, which could also just be a repo just for general application artifacts, not just third-party libraries. And then you'll see that in the light blue in the center, we have a CI/CD build server. And then we have a bunch of security concerns like, automated code analysis. Are we scanning for vulnerabilities like known CVEs? How are the users logging in? And then underneath all of this is container orchestration if we're using containers, and then we have nodes that make up this container orchestration. They're running operating systems, and those are probably virtual machines that are sitting on top of somebody's physical hardware. And then notice the orange in the upper left-hand side is that we do have to have some administration, probably a CLI for automation purposes, and then some templates, because unless we don't want to do infrastructure as code and repeat things, in broad terms, these are in general the pieces we're going to have. Now, in specific technologies, as you work this course, what's going to happen is that we're going to expose you to specific technologies, such as, for example, Kubernetes is going to be the container orchestrator. you'll see that GitLab is the light, bright blue box right there, and that's, for the most part, going to run our CI/CD pipeline. To the left of that, where it says Flux and Argo CD, one of those two will be watching our code repo for changes and ingesting our YAML and our app so that we can actually trigger GitLab, which in turn is going to build images, which are going to get scanned by Twistlock, possibly SomarCube, and then it's going to put artifacts into Harbor and Nexus, which are the green boxes right under Node 2. Once all of that happens, Kubernetes is going to ingest this based on specifications we give it, and it's going to basically disperse the apps, which you'll see in blue and purple on nodes 4, 5, and 6, and those will be load balanced by HA proxy, or another internal load balancer, or a cloud load balancer. It doesn't actually have to be HA proxy. And all of that will be monitored, for example, by Prometheus, Grafana, and Elk, which will handle logging, dashboarding, and monitoring and metrics. And if we add tracing in there, we might have Jaeger somewhere thrown into the mix. We might also have things like a service mesh on top of this. But for the purposes of this course, we're going to go from this in broad terms, image repositories, who's going to do the logging, who's going to do metrics and monitoring, who's going to do container orchestration, to this, Kubernetes, GitLab, Twist. And to be very fair about this, Twistlock and SonarQube, for example, are not going to be, we're going to dive deep into those. We're also not going to dive deep into Prometheus, Grafana, and Elk, but we are going to dive deep into all of the core infrastructure and components, the other things that are listed here, to make sure that you understand what containerization is, what container orchestration is, how do we use GitOps, particularly with Flux and Argo CD, to get to images that then are deployed onto Kubernetes and various other platforms. So week 1 has us starting by making sure that we're all foundationally aware of what DevOps and Docker are. What is containerization? What is this? What is the container runtime? What is the specification for containers? It's not just Docker. Docker is like Kleenex. It's a brand of containerization. But it's not the whole kit and caboodle, although thank you for Docker, because they did actually share that out with the world, so that was amazing, right? So our first week, we're going to be focused right here. And every week, by the way, your instructor is going to come back to this image and remind you, this is why you're learning this. Week 2. Week 2, we are going to be moving over into basically Kubernetes. And we'll have already laid the foundation with Docker, because you'll understand that, about containerization at a base level. You'll understanding about platform engineering and the overall use of this big bang platform, which is a subset of Platform 1. But we're going to talk about the fundamentals of Kubernetes if you've never seen it before, and we're going to talk about some advanced Kubernetes. That's week 2. Week 3, we're going to talk about Helm, which is a templating function. It is basically a way, almost think of it like apt or chocolatey. It's a way to source orchestrated deployments of specific software into Kubernetes. That's what Helm is. It's templates, it's charts. That's what it is. Flux is going to be covered because that is a very individualized way for a team to monitor their Git repos and have an agent initiate a deployment or some kind of change based on what is committed into that Git repo. And there's lots of ways to approach that, but that's what Flux is going to be. Harbor is a way to not only host images for containers, so container images, but also to do some vulnerability scanning. And then we are going to have a little bit of GitLab fundamentals here, which is why the plus sign is there, is that we will talk about a little bit of CI/CD, which is the light blue box GitLab. We will talk a little bit about the CI/CD pipeline at the end of week 3. It won't be a major part of it, but it will be there. And then week 4, we're going to dive into advanced GitLab. So a lot more about the runners and distributed systems and setup. And then we're going to talk about Argo CD, which is kind of a service way to do what Flux does. So think of this as GitOps as a service, where you can actually go to the service and say, hey, I want you to watch this repo, and then based on certain criteria, I then want you to initiate some kind of response, a deployment, invoke GitLab, some variation thereof. And we are going to do a little bit of advanced Kubernetes in this week 4. And so you're going to see us kind of coming back to this to make sure you understand now that you have all of these tools and other things in place, what does Kubernetes actually doing with all of this software? Week 5 is going to be the bring it all together week. So for all the things that we have touched and some things that we haven't, because we can't cover everything in a 6-week course, this ecosystem, it takes a while to master. It just takes time to invest in it. But we've given you strong foundations. And what we're going to do is we're going to actually walk you through how Platform One's Big Bang development setup is done. And we're going to explore it. We're going to show you how to enable additional software just with a few lines of YAML. And you're going to walk through this whole space and bring together everything you've learned in weeks 1, 2, 3, and 4 into this simple Big Bang install. And then last but not least, you will end week 6 with this capstone project. And you're going to do a presentation. Now I know that terrifies some of you. Don't be afraid. It's going to be very gentle, be very structured. But the idea here is that if we give you a node, can you set up a development environment just like what we covered in the week prior? If we want you to enable monitoring, how will you do that? What if you need to back it up? What are your options? What if something broke? What if something breaks? What if something breaks? Can you troubleshoot it? And what if the customer comes back to you and says, you know what, we realize that we need mutual TLS on our applications, so we're going to need the service mesh because we don't have time to do it in code. We're going to do that. How do you enable a service mesh? So we'll show you some of these things in class, but at the very last week, you're going to actually take your time and show us, not do you know it, but can you figure it out? Because in many cases, we've already shown you. In some cases, we haven't. And so we're wanting to know, do you know where to go for those edge cases to find out and get more help? Okay? That's the entirety. So quick recap. You're going to start here in broad terms. Code goes in, something happens, application comes out. Then we're going to get into specific technologies from broad terms. And then we're going to walk through Docker, Kubernetes, additional software that will help you manage things like templates, GitOps, container images. We're going to walk through CI/CD and a little bit more GitOps. And then the week 5, you're going to do a simple Big Bang install in a development environment. And then you're going to have your capstone project and presentation, which is going to allow you to just show us what you've learned. Thank you very much.